welcome to today's episode of the Uncorked Corner podcast. We are excited to invite our friends Olga and Barnaby from Teutonic Wine Company to join us in the podcast today. Before we get started, can we have you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about how you got into this space?
Olga?
Well, hello there. I'm Olga Tuttle, and I got into this space of making wine with my husband because of my husband. So I think he should probably start off on how he got on this wild journey.
All right. Hi, I'm Barnaby Tuttle. I'm Olga's husband, also winemaker at Teutonic Wine Company. Grew up in Portland. I've had a lot of different jobs. I've worked in restaurants. I've been an iron worker, an auto wrecker, and basically woke up one day and decided I want to make wine. Told Olga that, and it's been a slow but crazy avalanche ever since.
There
Absolutely.
were a few other things that happened.
That's like two or three other things
That's a
happened.
very boiled down version, but that's okay. It did kind of happen like that.
Yeah, and I understand there was, a big career switch. You kind of got into this here and you've done some different things. Talk to me about that a little bit. When you decided you started getting into the wines and exploring that, what made you decide to pursue this as a career?
Well, the career change started with a different career change. I had been doing blue collar work, worked at Oregon Iron Works, and then I want to give a shout out to my friends at Wildcat Auto Wrecking because I was working there. It's all like pre 1980 Dodge Chrysler Plymouths. I've driven mostly early 60s cars for the most of my life anyway. And I decided I wanted to pocket some money and travel. So I started waiting tables at a restaurant, and they basically nudged me to taking wine classes. They're like, you're a good server, but you know what? Your wine knowledge is rough. And I was pretty bummed out. I really thought it was going to be a bunch of pretentious, snobby people and, everybody swirling glasses and talking about strawberries and cigar and, pencil shavings. I went to the wine class, and it was blind, silent, and it blew my mind. It tore my head off. The second class introduced me to the idea of terroir, which to this day is one of my favorite things in the world. And it just means that wine tastes like the place it's grown. And so when I get interested in something, I become very fixated, and I became extremely fixated on wine, meeting every winemaker I could, taking notes, drinking wines, planning my weekends around which wines I was going to drink. You could travel the world by going to your wine shop and buying wines for some exotic country and drinking those wines and reading about the place. And anyway, a year later, I became the wine buyer at that restaurant. And I called in a German importer named Ewald Mosler. He came in, I don't know, he had 14 Mosel Rieslings in his bag. I tasted and I bought every one. And I came home that night and said, Olga, I'm going to have to quit my job and learn to do that. And it happened. It wasn't like overnight I quit my job, but we had the opportunity through our great friend Gisela Green to plant a vineyard on her property. We did that. And one foot in front of the other, the next thing you know, it was 2008. And we made our first 120 cases.
That's amazing. It's serendipity, right? It just all lines up the way it's supposed to.
It's like surfing the internet of life.
Well, it's obvious that you are very passionate about it. And I think that that's clear from the variety that you have as well. It's, it's one thing to make one wine, but it's another to really put your heart and soul into having like this really nice variety. Can you tell us a little bit about how you decided to create the variety that you do have and how you were able to kind of go from creating your first wine to really moving into other types of grapes and wine varietals?
Sure. So, if I was a writer, I'd be expressing myself through words, or if I still had my band, it would be music. So this is my personal expression and what I want to communicate and say. And to digress, early Oregon wine history was dominated by a French story. And that's a great story. And, looking to Burgundy and the Loire Valley, and these are amazing wines. But the world has countless stories. And we already had through this importer, Ewald Mosler, a connection to German wines. And they're a little more difficult to sell, they're a little less common, but I found it, a really interesting, compelling way of looking at things. And just so, in a nutshell, to me, German wine is one, grapes that grow in Germany, two, focused, precise winemaking, lower alcohol, very fresh, bright, acid-driven food wines. And knowing Ewald, having these connections, going to Germany, learning from great wineries, it gave me the opportunity when I came back to be part of the Oregon wine community, but playing my instrument or telling my story with a different flavor. And that's why we chose to do the German thing. German grapes, Pinot Noir, very common in Germany for 1,000 years, but it's called Spätburgunder. So in Germany, it's not Pinot Noir, it's Spätburgunder. Pinot Gris, or as they call it in Germany, Grauburgunder. Pinot Blanc,
Weissburgunder.
Weissburgunder.
Riesling.
Yeah, Riesling, it's the same. And Pinot Meunier is in Germany. So we're just taking grapes that exist in Germany, looking for the coldest, highest elevation vineyard sites to reproduce the long, slow ripening, the lower alcohol, the fresh acidity.
When you were doing the exploring and learning how to make that German wines, what was your favorite experience as part of that? Favorite place you got to travel to? Anything along those lines?
Just human interaction, meeting cool people that aren't like me.
The hardest we did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so steep. You have to hold your bucket between your legs because bucket will fall when it's this steep. But the people we met there, dear friends, good friends, people that, speak a different language and grew up in a different world. And it's just, finding your own humanity through finding humanity in people that aren't like you. And
the vineyards are so important to them. Sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
But that harvest, I just wanted to backtrack a little bit. Like the whole town helps harvest. Like the kids, they don't go to school for 2 weeks, so they're out there with their moms and dads and grandparents just harvesting grapes, and it becomes like this whole communal thing.
Mhm.
And so many families own just even small plots of grapes, and they make wine just for the family. Some of them are for a business, but many households make wine just because of tradition. So it's really fun to be with them and try their wines.
Absolutely. That's definitely a cool thing to experience as well. It's completely different than a lot of, things we have here. You don't find that as those regional sort of things that everyone in that whole area really is all in on around here as much.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about these wines now. I know we have 3 here and you can take us through them as well, but we have the Gewürztraminer, which I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I might not be, the Riesling and the Merlot. So talk to us about those 3 wines here. Take us through, as you would a tasting. In what order, first of all, would you do this? And then take us through these sausage pairings that we have here as well.
Sure. So I'll do the wines. Olga can do the sausages.
Oh God, I don't know anything about the sausages.
We'll pretend just like
Okay.
they can't see us. Yeah, everybody, we were like super, like we're wearing chef hats. We know everything about these sausages. All right. So I'll do the wines, and then Olga can read what the sausages are. And anyway, so the first one is the Wallstrom Riesling. This is or was our friend's vineyard. We farmed it. In fact, Olga and I planted these Rieslings. It is on a 50% slope, all rock. It was a former gravel mine. We had to plant this vineyard using a jackhammer. And Olga and Annie were out there helping me on the cliffs, carrying the 300-pound generator for the jackhammer so we get the plants in the ground. And that ties into what I love about Riesling. Riesling, to me, Riesling and Pinot Noir are the #1 terroir grapes. There's so much mineral. There's so many earthy flavors buried under the fruit, the bouquet of this Riesling. You're going to find really amazing acid, which will help cut through the fat and the spice of the sausage or salami. And it's a 2019, and it's a relatively dry Riesling. Any adages love? What's a sausage? or salami?
Well, the first one here is a chorizo rioja. But what I do know is the people that make it, and they're really great. And it's a big Greek family, kind of like my big fat Greek wedding. They live here in Portland, and they own 3 restaurants. And then they have this, their charcuterie, I think, is distributed nationwide. And they're just the nicest people. And we've worked with them for many, many years. And our wines, like Barnaby was saying, go so well with salty, fatty foods. So we thought it'd be fun to taste the wines with a salumi.
Yeah, the salumi, Eli, their salumist, is the best anywhere. I've had a lot of salumi all over the world, and this is my favorite. And what Olga says about the wines pairing with this, I call my wines butcher block wines. My wines, charcuterie, wild game, pate, rustic, home cooking. There's a whole lot of acid to cut through the fat and just enough sweetness that the wine's pleasant to drink.
And I just took a sip of the Riesling after taking a bite of the salumi, and it also has a little bit of saline touch to it.
Oh, from the mineral,
Really,
the
really nice.
salinity,
Here, you try it.
absolutely.
And I've gotten to try both of these now. So I started off having the wine, the Riesling, to start to taste that absolutely delicious wine. Definitely a very drinkable one, as you were saying. And then I paired it up. I did the chorizo rioja to start off here. And then once you had that, put them together, it's a completely different experience, but they work
It's
together
a happy
very well.
explosion, huh?
Yeah, it's great.
My
Something else. Oh, go ahead.
my favorite of the 3 wines, they're all very good. My favorite was the Gewürztraminer. And I think what's interesting is I don't drink that a lot, but I really enjoy it when I do. And I actually paired it with I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but the Finocchiona. And I loved that one. That was my favorite. I think what surprised me the most actually about the sausage was that I'm expecting it to be like this really hard, like I'm sometimes you get charcuterie sausage and it's like harder and it's harder to like eat it, but when you eat it, it's funny, it's like it feels like it's very firm, but it like melts in your mouth. It's so good.
It's moist. Yes, absolutely.
And with the wine, it's like even just like the mouth feel is really nice. So
and the interaction with
delicious.
the spice and the saltiness and the fat, it's very nice. Very nice.
It's
That's
a
the one
perfect.
that I'm going
I was
into
going to
next
point
now.
out in the Riesling, one last thing. And you know what? This is not going to be a normal wine tasting, but this Riesling, think about like the smell of like a vinyl beach ball in the wine. It's not a whole lot, or a shower curtain or a pool toy. Do you get that a little bit?
I do get that a little bit. Yeah, I never would have pegged that without you suggesting it, but absolutely.
And it's like a super food friendly smell. I'm just using the closest thing I can, use to connect you to what I'm thinking about. But that's very typical to Willamette Valley Riesling. Riesling in general is a very complicated grape. And a lot of times in Germany, they'll say, oh, like diesel or suntan lotion, but it always has this kind of like mentholy, I can't explain it, but I love it very much.
Perfect.
Very
So
nice wine.
let's jump into the Gewürztraminer next to talk about that one. I haven't tried this one yet. I'm about to take my first sip now. So
I
take
already
us through
teased
this
it,
one here.
sorry.
It's one of my favorites too. I think it's kind of underrated and nobody really thinks about it, or they think it's like something your grandma would drink. I think it's hard to pronounce for one thing, and people don't want to say it. And it does have this aromatics, but if you can get past the fact that it is a little bit on the sweeter side, usually, not always, you can have a bone dry Gewürztraminer, but it does pair so beautifully with salty, fatty foods. And I think I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I don't think I like it. Same with Riesling, it's too sweet. And then they try it and then they end up really falling in love with it.
Yes, this wine is special because of the vineyard. This is some of the best Gewürztraminer in Oregon.
Yeah, super old vines. They're like 40 something years old. They don't produce a whole lot of fruit, so it's super concentrated and just gorgeous.
High elevation, they struggle super hard. In fact, we didn't get any this year or last year because of what a struggle these plants have. They got frosted and nothing happened.
Yeah,
But
there
when
was
it does ripen, it's the best.
Yep, yep. Yeah, what happens is there's like a bloom, an early bloom, and then there's a late frost and all the buds freeze off, and then that's it for the growing season. You won't get any fruit there. So it's really sad when it happens.
Mm.
Interestingly enough, with this one too, when I taste it and when I smell it, what this reminds me of is a lot of sakis that I've actually tried.
Mm.
Interestingly
Oh.
enough.
I love sake.
Mm.
Yeah, it's real nice.
I
Do
don't
you
know
have
what
a
it is. It might
favorite?
even be more of the texture thing, but the texture
Mhm.
seems similar. And then some of the same flavors. Obviously, you're not getting that same like the lychee, like that Asian pear that you would get with the sake, but the subtle sweetness, but also with it, not being super, sugary on that note, definitely leans that way for me.
Yeah.
There's a
And-
lot of honey in this.
Mhm. And our wines change over time. So if you were drinking this in 2018 or 2019 after we bottled it, it would taste quite different than it is today. So one thing about our wines, both our reds and whites, really start to shine after a few years in bottle. We wish we could hold them back before we start selling them, but it's a financial thing, so we can't. But we always encourage people to sock away a few wines, a few bottles for a few years, and then pull one out every year and taste them, and they will
Yeah, it's
evolve
fun.
quite a
Like to
bit.
see how they change.
I haven't been to Oregon yet, and I would love to, and that's definitely on my list. But when we went to Napa, that was one of the things that we were told a lot from different vineyards that we visited was, this wine is one that you're going to want to keep in your wine fridge for a couple years before
Mhm.
you open it. And I had never thought about that, because most of the time, if you're not educated on why you would do that, you would think like, I'll just crack it open. But the flavors build up so much, and the complexities really come out over those couple of years. And we've been now it's probably been 3 or 4 years, and we're still opening bottles from there, and it'll be the same bottle, but it will taste better. So I believe that. Absolutely.
And yes,
Yeah.
please come visit us. It'd be cool.
Oh, we'd love to have you.
And I guess I keep forgetting. if I say Portland, I need to say Oregon, because I'm Boston. I'm from far Portland.
Yeah, Nick, we always talk about that.
It's Portland,
The
Maine.
other Portland. Nick
Oh,
lived up
right,
there
right.
for a while.
If you
Oh,
say
yeah.
you're from Portland and you're Boston, they'll
Oh,
assume
they're
you're
gonna say
from
Portland,
Maine.
Maine. Oh, I want to go to Portland, Maine too.
Portland, Maine is amazing. I
We love
lived
it.
there for 3 years before moving back to Massachusetts this year,
Oh,
and I
cool.
miss it, and I want to go back every day. It
You know,
is
we need
such an
to-
awesome city.
We need to do a Portland trip, because there's also a Portland in England.
No,
We'll hit all the Portlands.
we'll have a whole
Maine is
podcast
named
on
after
Portland.
England.
This
And
is kind of
Portland,
a
Oregon.
weird little
Go ahead.
side note, but I was reading this article once. Someone sent it to me when I was moving up to Portland. It was called like A Tale of Two Cities. And it was all about how the guy that actually started Portland, Maine, also
Uh-huh.
started Portland, Oregon. So that's why a lot of what they say, the cities have two very similar vibes to them.
Yep.
A lot of arts, a lot of great like craft foods and drinks and everything. But I guess it's the same founder of the two cities and same character.
Well, there's a debate. That's true. But there were two guys here, and one guy's name was Lovejoy, and there's a street, and they're all in alphabetical order, and the other guy was Pettygrove. And I don't remember which was which, but one said, nope, we're naming it Portland. And the other guy said, nope, we're naming it Boston.
Mhm.
And they tossed
story.
a coin, and your Portland guy won.
There you go. And now we have two Portlands.
That's right.
And by the way, we're totally on subject. I always say that wine is WD-40 for conversation. And when you quit talking about the wine and laughing and talking about things like this, the wine's doing its job.
I love that.
Oh, yeah.
It's true. Wine isn't just about wine. Wine is about everything.
Yes, brings people together.
Absolutely. Even people from Portland, Maine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think on the Gewürztraminer, it's funny that we think about that, right? Like, I think, and I don't know if this is really just in the U.S., but a lot of times we gravitate towards the wines that we're familiar with, and like you
Mhm.
said, the names that are just everybody knows this wine, right? Everybody knows this type, but they don't know that not all white wines are sweet, and not all rosés are sweet, and there's just such a huge spectrum. But even my husband, when we went to Napa, is like he never drank white wine and he wouldn't drink it. He always said it's too sweet, I don't like it, you know. And we went, and it's, you start trying them because, you know, they're putting them in front of you and they're part of these tastings, and you start to realize not all white wines are very sweet. Like, you know, you're thinking like sickly sweet, like something that's like juice. It's so not the case. I mean, there's so many amazing white wines with such great complexities, and I think I wish more people would be open to trying them. And I think that's what you get from, you know, Nick and I obviously have those experiences with you and our guests, and we love that. But if you're not familiar with wine, I think the best thing to do is really to go in person and sit down and talk to people, because you don't really understand it otherwise.
Yep. And it's, you know, I've been kind of dealing with this. I've been getting back into cigars, and, you know, I go to a shop and I want to tell somebody my palate, and I don't know a whole lot. And I found this kid, he's like in his mid early 20s, but he gets my palate and he talks about it like wine, and he's not condescending. He doesn't judge me for not knowing all the right words. And I think when you're getting into wine, if you can find somebody that listens to you, that doesn't shove what they want down your throat, but respects you, doesn't, you know, make you feel like it's not condescending, it's a super helpful thing.
There's a lot of information on Instagram now, and there's a lot of like Wine Folly, for example. It's this gal, and she does like literally 2-minute overviews. Like I just saw one today on Chianti, and she talked about the region in Italy and the different flavor profiles of Chianti and when to drink it. And it just gives you this little overview. And she's like, go to your store, your retail shop, and ask for a Chianti and try it with something with tomato sauce or something Italian. And you just kind of learn bit by bit. It's not like you want to sit down and learn everything, because wine is overwhelming. There is so much to wine. And when you start learning about wine, you start realizing how little you know about it. I mean, there's just a whole world of just German wines. And we just happen to know the German wines better because we've been to Germany many times. We've had a lot of German wines. We have sat down with German families and had their wines, so we're pretty knowledgeable about it and all the different predicate system. But that's just one tiny little nugget. Then you can start getting in French wine. Oh my God, I have so much more to learn about French wine. And we're going to be going to Alsace in 2024 and visit some wineries. We've been to northern Italy. We want to go to the cool climate regions, and it's just,
I mean,
you
it goes,
never stop learning.
there's Czech wine, there's Ukrainian wine,
Georgian wine,
Russian wine, you know, all over the Balkans, Croatia, Bulgaria. There's like Uruguay has really cool wines. I mean, if you like to travel or you want to learn about other places, and if you really want to get crazy with it, go online and find a bottle of wine from Uruguay and cook an Uruguayan meal. You're halfway there. And like sometimes they're like, well, we're kind of crazy. Like we'll like get into something, we'll print out some poetry from a place and read the poetry, you know? Oh, and I was going to say something too about trying all these things, learning what you like. But I think one of the most beneficial things in the world is enjoying things you don't like. If you haven't had a certain type of food and you order it, don't send it back and try to get that shit for free. You know, figure out why you don't like it and cross it off. I've had that and I don't like it because it's too salty, because we learn a lot about ourselves, understanding what we like and why we don't like what we don't like.
And push yourself a little bit, like go out of your comfort zone and order something that you think like, oh, I've never had that before, but I'll try it. You know, and same with wine. Don't keep buying the same wine that you know. I mean, there's nothing wrong with comfort food and drinking your favorite Merlot, but experiment a little bit. And you don't have to spend a lot of money either. There's so many great European wines that are so inexpensive, a lot cheaper sometimes, many times actually, than you know, California or Oregon or Washington wines. So I say go out there and experiment.
I definitely agree with that. And I myself, I'm more of a whiskey drinker more than anything.
Ooh,
And
we like that too.
yeah,
What kind of whiskey do you like?
so I'm all over the map. It really depends. But primarily, I would say I drink more Scotch than anything else. Rye would be the second, bourbon would be the third for me if I had to rank them.
So I'm getting into Scotch. Tell me what you think I should be drinking.
That is a loaded question. So whenever, it depends on who I'm talking to. So whenever I have someone that's just starting to get into it, and maybe you've been a bourbon drinker, a great scotch that I would recommend that you try to kind of transition over would be something like a Dalmore 12, because it's
Okay.
very similar to bourbons with its characteristics, but it's got more of those delicate scotch notes. The last thing I would do is recommend something super peaty, anything from Isla that's going to be that sort of, they call them smoke monsters or peat monsters, because your palate, you have to adjust to that. You have to build up to that level of peat. And once you do it, it's the same thing. I've told this story many times on this podcast before, but when I originally started getting into whiskey, you start with the basics. You start with Wild Turkey 101. You start with Jack Daniels, and then you branch off and you branch off. And eventually you work your way up to a point where you can have barrel picks. You can have more cask strength whiskeys, because you build your tolerance up to even a high alcohol percentage, which is another barrier with scotch, because a lot of the bottles you'll have be 55 to 60% alcohol. And if you're not used to that, that's all you'll taste. You won't taste the scotch. So it really depends.
Do you
on
put a
what
little water in it when they're at that high proof?
I always try it straight first, and
Yeah,
then I'll
yeah.
use the dropper. We actually, so I'm part of a whiskey club, Strength and Scotch, and they were on our podcast before. They had their own podcast, and that's how I started actually getting into whiskey, by
Cool.
listening to them. And I joined this whiskey club with them, and we haven't done one in a couple months, but we'll pick a bottle, or they'll do samplers, and we'll try a few different ones. But that's always the experience that I've had. You try it without the water, then you try it with the water, and you see the difference, because it does change and it does open up. But it's cool to be able to experience the before and after.
And that's
You
episode
haven't joined
65 for anybody listening. I'll put it in the show notes. It's episode 65. We're almost at 100. You guys are with us this year in our third season, Nick? So we're really moving. But episode 65, if you wanted just to hear a little bit about Scotch, obviously they're very specialized in that. So it's a great listen.
Noted.
Anyway,
Yeah, it helps my winemaking too. Drinking Scotch. I also really like rum, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I've been smoking my tobacco pipe. We have other things to smoke in Oregon. I think you guys have that in Massachusetts now too.
And Maine.
And Maine. But and also cigars. And it's crazy that if you take notes and you really think about everything you're doing, one really does translate to the other. I just basically like to eat and drink.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Probably more than we should.
That's why we're here.
The moral of the
That's
story,
so
what I
cool,
was
yeah.
getting at is when I got into whiskey and when I got into craft beer was the same way. I always buy something different. I can probably count on one hand the number of whiskeys that I've rebought, because I always want to try something else. And I'm also not a heavy drinker, so almost every bottle that I have, there's very few bottles that I've finished, because I'll buy a new one, then I'll try that. So I have this big extensive collection that I've built up of quarter drinking whiskey bottles, because I just keep buying new ones. But I've never had two that taste exactly alike. You can always tell the difference if you put them side by side. So it's hard to classify.
We probably should get back to wine talk. I'm always hijacking things and taking them off the road. But so when I do progress in my Scotch drinking, what are some ones that really tug at your heart?
My number one bottle, this is one that I have rebought multiple times, Highland Park 12. Anything from Highland Park, excellent.
I think he has the bottle and he wants to show it to you.
So do I get to go straight to the head of the class? Is it this guy?
You
It's
do.
the Viking Honor.
Yep, that's the
I
one.
like it a lot so far.
Excellent. I've tried one of my favorite scotches that I've had, and then we can go back to talking about your Merlot next. It's the Highland Park 18. The Highland Park 18 is the top of my pinnacle. That's the best scotch that I've tried so far.
Oh, well, I'll definitely look for it. Thank you.
So tell us more about the Merlot. We can get back to talking about the wine here.
Except for, I think it's Pinot Noir.
It's a Pinot Noir.
Oh, Bianca,
I was trying to sneak it in, but I think I gave Nick the label.
That's
we
Bianca's
could
fault.
switch to Merlot.
It is my fault.
Never mind. Yeah.
Sorry, Nick.
Okay, so
So we make a lot of Pinot Noir, and one of the reasons is because, well, Pinot is really big in Oregon. It's a great growing atmosphere and terrain for it. But what I think what Barnaby likes about it the most is it reflects the terroir. You said that
Mhm.
Pinot is like one of those grapes
Well,
that just absorbs.
And I like this one the most because we planted it together.
Oh, yes, we did. This is the Alsea Vineyard we planted in '05.
We don't,
And we didn't know what we were doing at the time.
I knew I asked enough questions, but I kind of didn't know.
I mean, it
But
turned out
this is
well.
kind of
It turned out okay, yeah.
this is kind of cool because we don't make a lot of wine with the fruit we grow, but two of the wines on this table, this is rare, were planted with our hands. So let's talk about Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir to me, yes, it's a red wine, but think about the other red wines. Think about a red wine, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Malbec. Those wines are basically black wines. And if you look at this, I don't know what the lighting's like, but this is a little bit darker than a rosé. And that's a natural color of Pinot Noir. So Pinot Noir, in a way, is not a rosé, but it has a lot of white wine qualities as well as red wine qualities. And its precision, its silkiness, its agility allows it to show soil and weather and climate. And if there's a scent of a forest in the vineyard and it's always blowing through with the breeze, because it's a more delicate red wine, it allows it to say a lot more. Just like if we're in a room and a bunch of people are talking and the big mouth with the loud voice shuts up, then there might be a really smart person saying something cool pretty quietly. And I think that's what Pinot Noir is in relationship to terroir.
And even if you take like a Pinot Noir cluster and put it next to a Merlot or a Cabernet, the Cabernet and Merlot, they have such thick skin and there's so much tannin in it. So to make red wine, you crush the juice and then they soak on the skins, and that's what makes the red color. Pinot Noir, you can soak it on the skins for 2 weeks and it's going to be ruby red rather than sort of this purpley thing. And I think for a long time, especially in like the 80s and 90s, there was a time when producers were making a bigger style Pinot. And this happened
with chemicals and dye.
Well, and cold soaks and,
Mhm.
And that was happening a lot when we first started making wine. So Barnaby was in a shared facility, and I don't mean to take this story away from you, but so he's making his Pinot and all the guys are tasting each other's wines and they're like, wow, this is really good, Barnaby, but you're not going to be able to sell this. And he said, well, why is that? And he's like, well, because it's not big enough. It doesn't have any oak flavors. You have to throw some oak chips at it and bulk it up and kind of spoofify it. People want 95-point Pinots, which was this whole rating system that was done out of what was that guy's name again?
Robert Parker.
Sorry.
And we're not
Yeah,
against this.
it's just that it was, people thought that Pinot needed to be a bigger wine, and what made Pinot better is if it was bigger and juicier.
And if these are the only Pinots people have ever tasted, they assume they're all like this. But, I'm like, if I move to a town and there were like 6 hard rock radio stations, and don't get me wrong, because I used to have a punk band. I like loud, crazy music, but maybe I'd be the guy that would start a jazz station. Not that there's nothing wrong with hard rock, but I was this guy that was sort of the rebel. I was going against the trends of wines getting bigger and more alcoholic and more oaky.
And what was interesting is these winemakers that he was with all really liked the wines. They just thought, well, if you're going to make wine like this, it's just not going to sell, or it's going to be that much harder to sell. And there was one winemaker who was Canadian, French, and she was in the shared facility, and she said, Barnaby, your wines taste really delicious. I think you're onto something really good. And he's like, yeah, but everyone keeps telling me I need to throw oak chips and kind of bulk it up, and it's not going to sell if I make this style of wine. And she said, Barnaby, what kind of wines do you like to drink? He's like, well, wines that taste like the one I'm making. And she's like, well, there you go. You need to make wines that you love, that mean something to you. It's coming from your heart. Don't make something that isn't what you believe in. I mean, don't make a wine that you think is going to sell. Then why are we making wine? We should make something else because then we can make a lot more money selling something else than wine. And that's kind of how our style started. And we were sort of, I'd say, on the forefront of moving more towards these leaner, higher acid, food driven wines rather than sort of the velvety, silky. Nothing, not that there's anything wrong with it. I just want to say that again. But it's our
This is
style.
what we do.
It's what we do. And I think a lot of people that taste our wines, think they taste more like European
Burgundy
wines.
or Alsace.
Yeah.
And the world has changed a lot. We're talking about where the Willamette Valley was in 2008,
Mhm.
and we were pretty fringe. Now we're basically mainstream. The pendulum has kind of swung so far back that I would say, like, if you go to a restaurant in New York and order this wine, or Boston, Massachusetts, like, there aren't two Bostons. They could have named Portland
I
Boston.
think there is a Boston somewhere, but in
But
the
there's
US.
Boston Harbor.
I think
in
there's a
Washington.
Boston in Virginia.
Yeah.
There we
yeah.
go. There we go. That was kind of making a self-deprecating joke because I'm from the other Portland. But anyway, yeah, I think that now if you go to a restaurant, our Pinot Noir is going to be like the same body as a lot of other Pinot Noirs in the menu. Things
There's
have
a whole
changed.
new like natty wine movement, but that's a whole nother story. So
But let's talk about this wine. So this is a little bit unusual for the Willamette Valley. It's not from the Willamette Valley. It's actually west. It's the only coastal Pinot in Northern Oregon, which
so Willamette
means
Valley is an AVA, just in case your listeners don't know. So it's
A
an
growing
American
region.
viticultural area, and lots of parts of Oregon and California have AVAs, but there are areas where there's planted vines that are not in an AVA. So you can't say Willamette Valley, you can only say Oregon.
But anyway, so this is a very unique place because it's quite a bit colder. It takes a lot longer to ripen the fruits. When all the other Pinot Noir has been picked, this fruit's hanging out with Mother Nature, trying to get riper, has a lot of time to develop a lot of complex, nuanced flavors. And, we talk about terroir. Well, this happens to fall into terroir of logistics. We went down with a truck and enough pick bins to, I don't know, pick 4 tons of fruit. We didn't have enough. And we're so busy at the winery, the fruit hung an extra 2 weeks.
So we went to
w-
harvest,
in
only
November.
harvested like 3/4 of it, and a quarter was left. I just want to make that clear. So
So-
this wine is made with the second harvest. That's why it's
Picked in
called
November.
Alsace Ultra.
And it was a crazy, crazy thing. That fruit was so beautiful and so ripe 2 weeks earlier. But when we picked it, we knew it was going to be one of the most special wines we've made. So, and it's 2014, so it has nearly 10 years now.
It's very good, and I think that I can see what you mean, where it's very good for as a food wine. I think I love charcuterie and I love putting boards together, and I also love to just have like a really nice home cooked meal. And I think that this, because of its really nice light nature, goes with all sorts of flavors. We had it with spaghetti and meatballs last night, and it was delicious. And it just, and I totally see what you mean with, I do rarely see such a light color of wine, and it was different and it was really good. So
Thank you.
I love that. Yeah.
So, let's talk about these guys. So what are the different ones we have? And let's talk about the flavors. The Lucanica.
Lucanica.
I know, Eli's
Lucanica.
Eli's gonna
Oh my
kill
God, I
me.
know. He's gonna be like, oh my God. I think it's Lucanica or
So
Lucanica.
it's definitely Greek.
Okay.
And it's
It
definitely
sounds very
tasty.
It's really good. So are you supposed to eat this
I like
little
the skin
outside
with the
wrapping
bloom.
thing? I really,
That's like
don't-
fungus. I mean, of course,
yeah, I
it's
don't
like
know. I
mushrooms.
peel it off.
Oh, boy.
I've been eating the skin.
You have,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
so
have.
we did it as well.
And there's something in that skin, that mold, that really reacts nicely with the wine and brings out honey flavors. And
It's just like cheese. You have to eat the whole thing for the
Check
whole
this out. I'm gonna
experience.
eat her skins. I'm gonna eat her skins. Like,
Taking them
I'm
off.
gonna tell Eli should actually sell this stuff. Peel it off. And I'll buy it for like $100 a pound.
There you go. It's almost like a pork rind.
So do you know how long it takes to make something like this? Like how long does the meat cure and hang?
It's
And
gotta be like a year or something.
what, a year?
I mean, it's so dehydrated, it's so dried out. And
Do you know?
it has to be like a
Bianca?
fermentation.
Do you have any idea?
I don't know.
I'm not
Oh.
sure, and I'm looking right now, and I'm
Oh.
looking on their website.
Yeah, Google.
It's very cool to see the pictures.
I feel like I can answer a lot of these questions. But I wonder, so do you think it's the meat that makes it taste different from one to one? Another,
The
or
spices too, and the
spices?
seasoning.
Mhm.
I think
the
it's probably the spices too. I think one of them, I
Yeah.
think it was the Lucanica. That's the way that I've been pronouncing that one.
Mhm.
I think
There
you're
was
right
almost
there.
like a really cheesiness to it.
Mhm.
While one of them, which I think was the Finocchione, is very like peppery.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
You can
Mhm.
certainly tell the difference between them.
Mm.
So we're in Boston. You think anybody from that band Morphine's listening right now? Oh, or like the Cars? What else? What are the
Or
bands?
the band Boston,
Oh,
maybe.
yeah, they're probably the MIT
That was
crowd.
the first band I've ever seen,
Really?
like a real rock concert. Yeah, it was Boston. I told you that.
That's cool.
I was 14.
Aerosmith, they're from Boston.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're gonna get our asses kicked by the Boston people now. But I actually saw. Do you know the club, the Middle East? I think it's in Cambridge Square.
Yep.
Yeah, when I was hanging out in Boston in '93, I found that place. I kind of would go in there every night, and I caught Morphine, and it was a record release party for Cure for Pain. I got invited back to
How
the
did you-
party
Wow.
just because I had good luck, but I had to fly back to Portland at 5 a.m, and I was a big mistake. I
And you made it?
didn't
You
go
made
to
the flight?
I made the flight. I didn't go to the party. I was a little bit ashamed.
Oh.
Tell us a little bit about your rock star past.
Oh, I was
Any
never a
fun
rock
stories from
star.
there?
Like I mean, you could probably talk to my mom like after school, I'd jump out in the kitchen and try and shred. I had a punk band called Phlegm Thrower, and we played like Satyricon, which is kind of Portland's CBGBs. I wouldn't say we're very good, but I think some of the songs are pretty funny. I did different things in the band, guitar, bass, singing, or I guess screaming. But it was
And he recorded it. It's
yeah.
on a CD or something, right? Or a tape.
Yeah. And I
We've
think there's
actually
like maybe
We've had a few guests on here that have had pasts like that. So we had the Brutality Coffee guys. Have you heard of Brutality Coffee?
Uh-uh.
So BREW Tality Coffee.
Oh.
They come from a music background, and they actually, after we had them on the podcast, that was back in probably 2020. They were one of our earlier episodes, and they now have a partnership with Motley Crue, making like Motley Crue coffees, themed coffees,
my
and everything.
goodness.
Widowmaker Brewing was another one. They had a music background. They had bands, but we've actually seen that quite a few times when people come up and they have those back. One of our very first episodes, Smith Devereaux Wines. Are you familiar with them?
Uh-uh.
Smith Devereaux Wines. They're very connected with the music scene as well, and they were one of our very first episodes as well.
There's so many musicians that make wine. The guy from Tool has a vineyard in Arizona,
Yep.
right? Or New
winery.
Mexico, or in a
Vineyard,
winery. Yeah. Who else? I know there's a bunch.
Metallica
Well, I
has
think
a
it's-
whiskey.
Yep.
Okay.
We have a Motorhead wine, but I think it's
Yeah,
kind of a
there's Motorhead
cliche
wine.
that
And we did a Red Fang wine with, do you know the band Red Fang out of Portland? They're like a stoner metal band. They play like big arenas, like they tour Europe, and I mean, they have a pretty big name, but we partnered with them and made a wine.
I think that
That was
what
very
it was
cool.
like when I was in high school, everybody had a band. And those kinds of people, kids don't do it as much. People, I think, are much more interested in culinary, fermentation, craft food, and people that were in music, there's no career in it, or you realize it's not going anywhere. Making wine is the same kind of expression,
It's so
or
hard to make
cooking
money.
food. It's no money in it, but you get to be as weird as you want to be, and it's a way to put your crazy ideas in other people's heads. So there's a super correlation between the two.
Well, what's that joke? How do you make $1 million in the wine industry? Start with 2 million.
I was gonna say start a restaurant.
Well, it's true. You have to be creative. You also have to think outside of the box. You have to be open to different, experiences and flavors. And a lot of, I think everybody's just like very different. And that's what is so beautiful about it, right? That's what makes, I think, the food and beverage industry so unique to other industries. It's just, you get so many different personality types, so many very interesting backgrounds. And that's why Nick and I love interviewing everybody, because everyone's so different. We always get different stories, and you just learn so much about how people get where they are and the passion that goes into it. So it's a beautiful thing.
Totally.
Everyone has a story.
Here's another question for you. We can leave it off with this one after if you like, 'cause I know we've had you for a while. What's the most outside of the box thing that you've tried with winemaking, and did it work or did it not work?
Do you think that would be the candied mushroom, the red Gewürztraminer, the yard wine?
Trying to think.
Um,
No, the cactus that you threw on the.
well, with us, there's a lot of things.
Well, that was kinda
The
crazy.
wine you're drinking right now.
Okay, okay.
So this wine is a single vineyard. It's planted on a steep cliff of all rock, and it's kind of like a bowl shape, and it amplifies the heat. And right in the middle of it, for some reason, I planted some cactus plants.
And
And
it's really hot and it could grow really quickly there.
and the cactus plants
Did very
put out
well.
fruit. And I thought, you know what? I think they call them
They're flowers, aren't they?
Nepales, I think they're called, or in English, I think they're called prickly pears.
Prickly
Okay.
pears, yep.
And so I just picked up like buckets of prickly pears, and I threw it in with the wine. So this Riesling
Yeah.
is like 1/10 of 1% prickly pear wine. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm gonna have to retry the wine.
Yeah.
Well, it definitely worked. I can confirm that. It definitely didn't throw this off. That's one of my favorites, these three. I really love that Riesling.
We probably should
It's
say
so
if you have a
special.
cactus allergy, don't drink this wine.
Maybe,
you know?
yeah. Warning sign.
I don't know how many people would know if they have a cactus allergy.
Yeah, it's not very common, I don't think.
Yeah, just maybe people don't know. Maybe 1 in 4, and we'll find out.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you can't really tell it's in there, but that's the story.
It probably makes a difference, and if it wasn't there, you could taste the difference, and then you'd be,
Well, how much did you throw in there?
I don't know, like 30 pounds or something.
30 pounds. Wow.
But they're bright colored, and when they was soaking in with the skins,
I remember that they were pink.
the wine was
Yeah.
pink at first because of the prickly pears. Nepales, I believe, also you could call it.
Okay.
Good people corrected me when I say prickly pear.
So the secret's out there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not
we've done
so
some
secret
good-
anymore.
Exposed on the Encore Corner podcast. Prickly pears and the Riesling.
I'm going to say one more thing that Barnaby's done that's kind of cool. So one year, talking about the Gewürztraminer that we love and how some years we get nothing. Well, one year, for some reason, it produced a huge amount of Gewürztraminer. Like we had like 10 or 11 tons of Gewürztraminer fruit came through the door. And I said, Barnaby, I can't sell that much Gewürz. I mean, it is a little bit hard to sell, no matter how delicious it is. And that's why we still have some 2018 and 2019. I said, we gotta think of something. And so he said, okay, I'm gonna make it into a red wine and I'm gonna blend it with Pinot Noir. So we have this red blend that we make. It's 75% Gewürztraminer, 25% Pinot, co-fermented. So the berries, the fruit are all thrown in together and macerate on their skins for about 2 weeks. And it comes out in this beautiful, vibrant, like light ruby red color. And some years it's a little more pale than others for whatever reason, because it's natural wine, you never know. But it's been one of our most popular wines. And it's a Gewürztraminer Pinot blend.
Oh, and I could taste the prickly pears in here
Oh
now.
boy, here we
I
go.
found it. And you know what it is? It's very subtle, but it's sort of like juicy fruit or a little bit of a bubblegum fruitiness on the palate. So I would tell anybody, we made one vintage of this with a cactus. If you want to have the only Riesling in the world with prickly pears, you can tell your grandchildren you have this
Why
wine.
haven't we marketed that? Like we completely forgot about that.
You have to start
We-
numbering those bottles now.
Yeah,
Whatever you have
really.
left.
Oh my God.
It's like
One of
it's like
100. You know.
Yeah.
we'd only made a few bottles too. It's like It's sort of like a bubble gum, but there's another fruit, kind of like bubble gum meets like canned peach, and it's on the palate. That's your prickly pear.
All right.
Yep. Done and done.
Well, we like it.
I'm sending out a press release tomorrow.
Hurry up. It's all gone. It's almost gone. Hurry up.
I can't stop eating this salumi.
I know it's addictive. I
It's so
really,
good.
really do love it. And you know, obviously we weren't well rehearsed to give any speeches about this, other than we passionately love it. I'll tell you what, like back in the day, I'd be driving the truck around to the vineyard, and my lunch would be
Oh, yeah.
one of these salumis. And I felt like Ernest frickin' Hemingway. I felt, like,
Biting it off and like sticking in his
so I had a
pocket.
salami in one mouth, cigar in the other. And I thought, that's some masculinity. That's going to impress my wife. I put on an ascot, and then the show's over.
Oh, and these guys also make other things too. They make like duck liver pates and
Yeah.
others. I know we bought like all kinds of mousses and
Oh yeah.
Oh, so
I've
good.
gotten like trotters from them. Other places like Disneyland for like good meats.
We're definitely going to try to have them on as well. I know
Yeah,
we discussed
I think
that
so.
prior when we were first talking, but we're
Oh,
certainly going to
fantastic.
reach out and get that coordinated, because we definitely want to talk to them a little bit more about how that sausage is made and, anything else that they have. We've had a couple sausage companies on. I don't think anyone has ever liked that joke when I
Nope.
brought them on. So I'll try to avoid that, but
We haven't had a cured sausage like that on though. It's usually Bianca and Pig Rock. It's like fresh sausage.
Mhm.
Oh,
Pork
right,
sausage.
right.
Yeah. Which are also delicious, but they're different.
also very local around here. So they've
Yes.
probably never heard of Bianca or
Yes,
Pig
that's
Rock.
probably true. Sorry. Well, I think everyone would enjoy the wine, so everyone should check it out. We'll put the link to the episode in the show notes, or to the website in the show notes. You're going to be listening to the episode, in your social as well. I think your personalities are so fun, and it really comes across in all of your social media. So definitely give Teutonic a follow wherever you are on social. You'll see a lot of what we talked about today, and I also saw that you do a lot of fun events and things for people who are local. So definitely worth giving you a visit if you're in the area, and Nick and I will look forward to hopefully getting out there and giving you a visit in person eventually.
Please.
That'd be so fun.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
All right.
having us.
Again,
Yeah.
thank you both for joining us tonight. We had so much fun. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Cheers.
Cheers.
Take
Yeah. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Be sure to follow us on social at Uncorked Corner and on the blog at uncorkedcorner.com for a taste of more food and beverage content.
And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe, rate, and review on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Thanks for listening.